Currently, there are two options in ship tutorials. The quick one,
white people be like,
okay, go stupid,
it's technically official, but somebody thought it was a great idea to multiply the speed of the video to 15 times. Now you're going frame by frame to figure this all out. The second option is by Oreo Gaming, which is a 5-part series and almost zero editing to show the important stuff. Videos combined are in total 1.6 hours, but they feel like years watching them.
4 hours! 4
With all that being said, this video would be impossible without all these videos' help. The rest of the videos are in the way that you should quote-unquote build a ship, as you could build a ship in any order. The order goes in 7 easy steps: planning, staging, exterior walling, holes and gaps, wiring and linking, quality of life, and extras. There are timestamps in the comments and in the description, so you can select specific parts at your discretion. FYI, the extra steps is simply so I can add more things in future updates, or in case I missed anything. That's the price of having Ultimate in the title. Before I start, I want to say that, other than a few weird features you have to learn to building a ship, it's not hard at all. In fact, I built a working ship after reading the Steam guide once, so there really isn't much of need for this video, but I'll do my best to make the experience easier, as well as litter some tips and tricks to help streamline your building process. This step could be skipped, but trust me, it will help. Before you even start building your ship, you should imagine what kind of ship you want to build. A prison ship, a station, or even a dreadnought. Having a very rough idea of where things go and how the hull should look like will help you out tremendously. If you want to take this step further, you could even use a ship that's already conceived, like a ship from Subnautica, or even a cross-section image from a book you may or may not have read 10 years ago. This will help you out a lot, but you will have to make some changes to make it feasible in Barotrauma. You're going to want to get familiar with the Barotrauma building HUD. You're going to be seeing it a lot. This lets you return to the main menu. This lets you open any ship that you have already downloaded, letting you explore it in its entirety. Really useful. It's an amazing feature because it lets you remaster or remodel ships that already exist, but also lets you take notes. For example, I learned how to use ducks by examining the Beryllia. This is the save button. The game autosaves your ships, but you should save as often as you can, as well as control the ship settings. Once you feel like the ship is seaworthy, you can test it, assuming you made a spawn point. It spawns in 2 AIs to assist you. The screen can get messy, so you want to adjust the visibility settings to focus on specific things, like building with or using wires. This helps you focus on the wires and, not see anything else. Use this tab to add in additional ships to your ship. Useful for adding in escape pods or detachable ship sections, or even shuttles. Just remember to link it to a docking port so it doesn't just float there. I'll talk more about these 3 later. The only thing you should keep in mind about this tool is the item assembly option, which lets you save multiple items and them as a preset. There really is nothing else to say about this tool, just use it for 2 minutes and you're a pro. Almost forgot. Here's a list of shortcuts listed on the Steam guide. I really only use Q to open up the selection bar, but Control N and M is nice if you want to flip items horizontally and vertically instead of clicking these buttons. Don't forget that you can access most items by right-clicking them, or press E on an item to open up the in-game menu. This may be the hardest part of building a ship, so I recommend you heed my words in this section more than any other. You may want to start working on the shell.
Wrong!
Unlike the guide, the shell does not come first. Well, at least know that it is not good practice. Imagine that you build your shell carefully and it's traced really well to the ship you have in mind, and then now imagine you're trying to put in an airlock and you don't have any space. You're either going to have to cram objects, mess with the scaling, and this will likely make it worse, and crewmates are known to spend most time in the submarine, so you'll have to mess up or carefully move your well-crafted shell. To avoid this, we'll try building the shell after the fact. The Steam guide does support this action. Keep in mind, what I say should not be taken too hard, and should be considered, as every situation could be different. Before we begin building your ship, you're going to have to do a lot of thinking about these keywords. Placement and relation. In Barotrauma, almost every item affects each other. One of the most important things to consider is the ballast in relation to the ducts and the ship itself. The ballast should be placed in an area that creates a path for water filtration. Ducts are signaled by water detectors to let water travel to the floor below. You want water to end up in the ballast, where the excess will be flushed out. This helps make your ship flood slower and drain quicker. You may feel tempted to place pumps everywhere, but all these pumps are powered and repaired. And by not capitalizing on the ballast, which I might add that you have to have, is arguably a weaker water filtration system. But that being said, it wouldn't hurt to add one large pump in an area that you cannot connect ballast to. In addition to that, you're going to have to consider the electrical equipment, and surprise, electrical equipment is not a big fan of water. So you're going to want to make sure that the room is either highly filtered or waterproofed by having the room in the center of the ship, if your ship is big enough to allow it. You're going to also want to consider the placement of guns in relation to the ship's shape to allow as few blind spots as possible. The gun loaders to the ammo storage, compartmentalization to stop and slow water before it can spread to the rest of the ship, the placement of docking hatches for accessibility. Now at this point you might be having thoughts like this is too much and you just want to learn how to build a sub. But building a ship is easy. You just need to add this and that and connect them, and they work. But by adding this level of thought and consideration, your ships will flourish, and the crews piloting them will be a lot more thankful. One of the hardest things to achieve with your ships is to create a playful environment. Take a look at the Typhoon. If you played this game long enough, this ship should give you a lot of memories. For me, it's the time that I tried to break into the armory by journeying to the far corners of the ship and traveling the main highway of the horizontal access shaft, or hiding bodies in the many nooks and crannies of the ship's underbelly, or by ascending the right access shafts to leave the ship after a hard-fought mission, or just to escape a husk outbreak that I caused. This creates an almost instant nostalgia, and that's what Barotrauma is all about. It's about putting you in this kind of environment with your friends to make these kind of memories. As a shipbuilder, your goal should be to achieve this above all else. It's hard to create, but you can do this by creating a central area where many people bump into each other, as well as adding in distant areas where people can plot questionable actions. Now, with all that to consider, we can start building. I will build an entire ship throughout this video, using the suggestions that I give, as well as many tips as I can. I will have to speed up the video on non-essential parts, or else the video is going to be... To start, I had to pick a sub. Now, you shouldn't have to pick a sub, you should probably have an idea of what you already want. You shouldn't build a sub for the sake of building a sub. I picked my favorite game, Death Stranding, and it has a ship in it, and the whole point of finding an image is to inspire, and just to have an idea of what the shell will eventually look like. That being said, don't be afraid to be completely original. Finally, we'll start actually building. After considering all the previous information, I decided I'm going to try to make a 3-story sub, and the ballast will be divided for compartmentalization, and will run the length of the sub. I'm going to draw a very rough outline of the sub with the picture in my mind. I'll finish the exterior during the exterior walling section. I'm going to place a few floors and doors as a measurement tool to see how big the ship is compared to the average person. I'll recommend you do the same for most of your builds. Showing you the entire ship build will be pointless and it would take forever. So instead of doing that, I'm just going to do something like this. Whenever there's boring stuff and not interesting, I'll just speed it up very quickly, just so you get the gist of it. Currently, I'm just trying to build the ship's hull, and I'm just trying to get a very rough outline of the ship. I don't want to do any sort of accuracy at all, I don't want to waste time with that. I'm just trying to get a rough idea of what the ship will eventually look like, as well as define the rooms and start thinking what our rooms are going to go. For example, the ballast, I know we're going to be at the bottom, but I would like to build the rest of the ship just so I can see how big it is and how much room I'm going to have to play with. But the problem is here, like right here, the ship was too big. I didn't like how big it was. So I decided to make it smaller so I could use less rooms, as I really didn't need that much space. This is one of the reasons why I suggest you don't trace your ship so carefully, because there could be things like this where you have to make edits and changes. Before we enter the next stage, I would like to show you something quickly. Once you place an object like this, you can edit it by moving it up and down with your arrow keys, kind of like pixel by pixel or inch by inch. Probably should have told you about this before, but I'm telling you now. Click up and down and you can align things better. I am going to talk a whole lot more about it during the exterior hulling sections, but just in case you want to build it side by side, this might help you out a lot. Like I said before, we're not trying to get too accurate, but this might help you better imagine what your ship is going to look like in the future. At this point, I started sectioning off areas and to start spawning in items. When I spawn in these items, they're not going to be their final resting place. This is more just like a way to show that this is going to go here and that's going to go there. When spawning in these items, you should consider always how are people going to get to them and what routes they have to take. One of the first things that might confuse you is railguns and coil guns. When you place them on top side, they're perfectly fine. But when you try placing one on an underbelly, it starts to get confusing. Like, for example, they're not rotated properly. If you click Y, they'll look like this. But you can define the range where it can shoot at by dragging these boxes. You want to get to a point where it's enough so they can shoot anything that's coming to kill them, but not enough so they can actually shoot the ship itself. Best not to give anybody the chance, even. You can click reload sprite, but the gun will kind of disappear. I wouldn't really worry about this because as soon as you click play or test, this should go away. Though, that being said though, I've had different kinds of experiences with it, so I'm just going to tell you right now, play with it. This is still janky. Like I said, did I mention that this thing is janky? This part of the ship took some time, not because it was hard, but just because I had to put myself in the player's shoes and see the world as he would see, and try to make it more easier, and sometimes harder for the player. Like I said before, try not to concern yourself too much with how an item works right now. Just have the basic understanding of what they do, and place them in the right area. And you can find a slight description if you hover over an item. If you notice, I placed my airlock slightly above everything else. Well, not really, I just kind of built it up a little bit. This is because you have to also consider how stations, have the airlocks, how you have to connect with them, and airlocks should be on the top of your sub. Here, I think I can get away with it, but we'll test that out later. I don't think I mentioned this before, but if you click the fourth button right over here, devices, you'll be able to see all the devices in the game. And generally, you're going to need about one of each, just one of every one. Generally, you don't need them all, but you need most of them. So I would recommend that as a good checklist to go through and just go through them all and just saying, hey, do I need this? Do I need that? Do I need the nuclear generator? Do I need that? And just go through everything you're going to need. I like to take this time to talk about junction boxes. We won't go too in depth with them because that's for the wiring phase, but I do want to talk about placement about them. There's 3 separate ways you can handle junction boxes. The first way is by stuffing them all into one room. This does have its benefits, like first off, all the junction boxes are in one room. You know where they are and you can deal with them all at the same time. But the problem is this might be a pain to just repair all at once, and it might seem discouraging to some people. The second way is by spreading it amongst the ship. You can have just every room have its own junction box and the reactor just powers that. This makes dealing with problems a lot more easier because each problem is kind of like an isolated incident. If the room isn't working, you can just check the junction box for that room. But this might make it harder for engineers to travel the ship and stuff and go to the repairs. The third way is a hybrid between the both. You could have all the junction boxes in one room, as well as have a junction box in each room. This will help with load problems, but the problem is you're increasing all the overall amount of junction boxes, so it could be a big pain to repair them all. So you have to consider where you place your junction boxes properly. You can do each way, there's no right or wrong way, it's your ship. Another thing you want to consider is gun placement. Similar to junction boxes, you can have guns all in one room, and or just spread amongst the ship. But you want to make sure that you at least have some decals on each of the guns, kind of like an arrow pointing up, down, left, and right. Maybe have blue arrows for coil guns and a red arrow for rail cannons. You can choose to actually keep the ammunition near or far away from the guns. I personally, in this ship I'm building, I don't want to keep the ammo loaders near the guns at all. I want to keep them near the ammo storage. I'm going to eventually put arrows beneath each of the guns to point in which direction to make it easier for the operators. I like to keep all my guns in the same room just so it's more easier to access, and if creatures start moving around the ship, a single operator could just switch to all separate guns. When it comes to oxygen, you don't have to worry too much. You just have to make sure that you at least have one oxygen generator, as well as one vent in every room that a person's going to be in. Personally, I don't put any oxygen vents inside the ballast tanks for obvious reasons. If you noticed, I ran out of space for an airlock. Well, you don't really need an airlock, but it's highly recommended. I have 2 docking hatches, and these are for outposts and respawn ships, but an airlock is for people to use to enter and exit the ship without, causing a massive flood of water. You don't really need it, but if you want to go exploring or, exit the ship for any reason, you're going to need an airlock. Airlocks are really simple. They have prefabs already created by the creators. You can access that by the item assembly list and just click it and spawn it in. But they're easy. It's just you need to have at least one pump to flush out the water in the center, and a button to open and close a door when you're entering and exiting a ship. Now that we've approached the end of the staging stage, I would like to give a quick overview on a few things. The ducts are too small for regular floors, so you either have to make the floors smaller or make the ducts bigger. In this case, making the floors smaller gave me more room, but all the doors didn't line up, so I added this small wall and I think it looks great. I just copied and pasted and adjusted each as necessary. If I didn't mention it before, you're going to need a water sensor for each duct. If you take a look at the reactor, you might think that it's safer to put it in the room above and set the loaders below. I did this because I wanted to make loading the guns easier by placing the ammo storage nearby, but switching them can be justified. I put the medical room over here because I didn't think it matters too much if it's not near the main area, as most medics carry medical supplies on them, but this also helps dissuade people from stealing medical supplies. Speaking of stealing, you're going to want to have a few safes around. Personally, I don't like safes, as the only way to open them up is with a keycard, which feels a bit cheap, but you're going to need them to store dangerous things on each floor, like drugs and weapons. I would highly recommend having at least one emergency supply cabinet for each floor. They do get wasted a lot, but even the best ships have them, and they help your crewmates keep your crewmates alive without making it feel like you're making this too easy. Cargo missions will not pay you if you lose a single item, so that's why I have a secure locker to protect the cargo from people and monsters alike. You're going to need to have at least one supercapacitor for each gun. You're going to have to keep the red box outside the sub and the green box in the sub for engines. Or the fact that water can pile here, so you should put a small pump. Or that legacy items are an option, and sometimes a better option for it because of aesthetics. Or how to store ammunition. Or the fact that you can switch to battery power instead of nuclear. Everything except for the last part is something you might have to learn for yourself. Or you could ask me a question and I could answer them, and anyone who needs these questions will see your question and the answer. You should try to work on the shell only when you've found a place for everything. The shell is your time for creativity. Don't feel bad about making slight adjustments for a good-looking ship. Your main goal is to make the ship look seamless and waterproof. I'll tell you in the next section why you just needs to look waterproof. I'm not the best artist, even though I made fine work such as this.
Whoa! Yankee with brim!
I made that purely because I was bored, and remind me never to do a video longer than 10 minutes. Like, even 10 minutes is pushing it. I really have no idea what to do with exterior hulling, other than patching up every hole, making some walls over here, making it look better. To be honest, it's really how far you want to take it. Like, there's amazing designs you could do, but it's pretty much up to you how far you want to take this. As long as you know how to click and drag, and then use the arrow keys to move an object inch by inch, you're pretty much set. It's all really cosmetic. 3 things I forgot to mention. You can change the color of items using the color sprite option. You can also change how an object is layered by changing its sprite depth, so you can place objects above or below other objects. You can select multiple items by clicking and dragging, or by holding Control and clicking multiple items. I'm going to red pill you, so you've had your warning. Walls, doors, hatches, and ducts do not stop water. In fact, they let it in. Ring off the Steam guide for a bit. Rooms inside subs in Barotrauma are defined by hull objects. If there are no hulls in the sub, there is nothing separating the sub from the water outside. You can see inside the galleon, a cool ship I might add, that water does not flow onto the deck because there's no gaps between hulls to allow water to through. You can see hulls in the status monitor, and it tells water level and oxygen quality of room. You can also set the monitor so it does not require oxygen detectors or any extra equipment. But this won't allow people to mess with the wiring, and it won't let them create a scene where you could flood the ship without people knowing about it. You can also name hulls, which helps people and AI alike identify certain areas of the ship. Gaps work hand in hand with hulls to allow water to flow through open and closed areas, such as ducts, hatches, and doors. These all automatically create gaps when you place hulls near them, but with open spaces you'll need to manually create gaps to allow water to flow through. Hulls are easy but should be treated carefully, as nothing really makes a ship bad like floating water. So make sure there are no open gaps, and do your best to place hulls inside walls, and even them out when coming into contact with other hulls. Almost forgot. Until we get a circular hull to place, you're going to have to place multiple hulls to cover areas that aren't perfectly rectangular. You can click these hulls and hold space and click other hulls to link them. This will make multiple hulls treated as one. You can see this on the status monitor as well as bots having an easier time navigating these areas. Before moving on to the next section, I would highly recommend you to actually explore your ship and make sure there's no leaks of water or anything. You can do this by placing down a spawn point and clicking the test button. Try exploring places with many gaps and you had to use multiple hulls on. Make sure that you're able to walk seamlessly throughout these areas.
Did I ever tell you what the definition of insanity is?
Wiring is not hard. It's just very time consuming and painful. There are 3 different ways to handle junction boxes. 1. Pile them all into a room. This lets your crew repair fast and efficiently. But if the room is compromised, you lose power to the entire ship, making each room have its own junction box. This does have its benefits, like not having to use an entire room, and also makes solving problems with wiring really easy, as each room has its own separate junction box. The third option is a hybrid between the two, having a source of junction boxes as well as having one per room. This lets you have safeguards and redundancies to prevent sudden power failure. It's probably the most safest out of the bunch, but it requires many junction boxes and a lot of space. Once you've placed your junction boxes, you're going to have to decide how you want to wire your ship. There are many different ways. The way I did it was created a room dedicated towards junction boxes, and I wired each specific junction box for a specific purpose, such as a specific box to deal with pumps, life support, lights, the engine. Pretty much all the tasks were separated to each junction box. I like this method because it makes repairs easy. If someone was in a situation where they're running out of oxygen, they would know which box they would need to repair first. But I also considered wiring each separate floor to a set of junction boxes. The basic mindset you should establish is that the devices usually need power and or signals to work properly. To power any device, you'll need a reactor to send power to a junction box, and then the junction box to the device. I usually like to put master junction boxes in my builds, instead of having to route every junction box directly to the reactor. Instead, I would route the master junction box to the reactor, and then wire all the other junction boxes to the master junction box. You could use a relay component to wire additional wires to junction boxes, as junction boxes can usually only have like 5 separate wires, but they don't really work. Did I mention jank? So please be careful with messing with relays. I use them to let a single junction box power all of the lights on my ship. The only reason that all my lights haven't exploded is because I don't think they implemented that feature in the game yet. The practice you should try to make is that let junction boxes do specific actions, test to make sure that your junction box doesn't overload, and if it does, try adding another junction box and rewiring the wires to split the load. Now, there are a few devices that are harder than others, like the guns and navigation terminals. For these devices, I'm going to be reading off the Steam guide. When wiring your navigation terminal, you're going to want to set velocity out, velocity X out to the engine, and you want to wire it specifically to the set force. And then you're going to want to wire the velocity Y out to the set target level on each of your ballast pumps. When dealing with rail cannons or coil guns, all you have to do is wire position out to position in and trigger out to trigger in. It's really simple. You can also see this in the diagram above. This is from the Steam guide. You can find a link to it in the description. Each gun also has to be wired to a supercapacitor, as batteries won't cut it. When it comes to depth loaders and the depth launchers, you don't even have to power it. You just need to wire a button to it to send a signal out and link the depth loader to the launcher. When wiring a discharge coil, you could go the normal route and have batteries loaded specifically for the discharge coils, as well as a junction box. I find this a little too tiresome using all this effort when you could just wire it directly to the reactor. This has some effects to the discharge. Number one being that you can effectively spam the discharge coil over and over and over again with no repercussions. And the second thing is that your entire ship loses power for 2 seconds every time you fire the discharge coil. To wire ducts, all you have to do is place a water detector and wire a signal wire from the water detector into the set state of the ducts. This will make it so that they will only open when it detects water. Linking is the easiest thing in the game, and you will wish that you could do it more. The main thing that you gotta link is the guns to the loaders, the oxygen generator to all the vents, and hulls to other hulls. All you gotta do is click on the object you want to link, and then hold space and click on the other object you want to link, and then you can keep on doing it over and over. It's finally time to cover up those walls and bring life into the ship. Now, my goal with this is to create an atmosphere of class warfare. Mechanics at the bottom, engineers and medics higher, both figuratively and literally, with the guards and the captain on top. I've also made it so that only the captain and guards can open a door to the exit the ship. You can change who has access to the door by either selecting the door or the button that's attached to the door. By switching the picked required to ID captain, ID _ security. That right there. You can use it to lock out undesirables from reaching certain areas, but first you want to add in all the gear. Try placing yourself in the shoes of a player and put the equipment that they could use / or need. Try not to make the ship too powerful. For example, I overstocked the ship with packed nuclear shells. I probably shouldn't have done that, but my ship, my rules. Though that does risk the people feeling like there's no need to do anything, as in the campaign, so try not to give your crew everything. If I didn't mention it before, you can right click or use the E key to open up inventory and store items. Hold left click and spam on item spots to spam the storage. I made one emergency kit and copy and pasted it all over the ship. I've also left a secret hidden area for people to congregate on the bottom left side of the ship, far away from the center. My goal is that people will go here and then they'll plan revolts. I didn't even dip my foot into the advanced wiring or talk about load balancing, other than adding more boxes until it works. I would highly recommend you downloading the Smart Systems pack made by Bogdan. It's a museum in here. It's amazing. What I like most about this is that you can just take what you want and simply slot them into your ship without knowing how it works. I'll tell you what though, if you leave a question, I will not leave it unanswered. If I don't know it, then I'll direct you to a fully trained professional. People like the Barotrauma community who answered in each and every one of my questions on the Discord, and even people like the Half Dead Killer who showed me the proper ways. And that's it.
Hey, you enjoyed the video? Maybe you should subscribe. It's a button right here.